Every rustle in the leaves, every distant howl, etched itself into my memory and then onto these pages. For years, I patrolled the Appalachian Mountains, convinced I was alone, until I wasn't. My journal isn't just a record of duties. It's a testament to the inexplicable, the horrifying encounters that redefine what wilderness truly means. Are you ready to step in my boots? The Appalachian Mountains stretched endlessly before me, their ancient peaks shrouded in morning mist that clung to the valleys like ghostly fingers. I'd been stationed at Raven's Hollow Ranger Station for 3 months when I started this journal, though at the time, I couldn't have told you why. Something about the silence here felt different. It wasn't the peaceful quiet of nature. It was expectant, as if the mountains themselves were holding their breath. My name is Owen Fletcher, and I'm a park ranger assigned to one of the most remote sectors of the Appalachian wilderness. The nearest town sits 40 miles down a winding mountain road that becomes impassable in winter. Most days, I see no one. The station itself is a modest wooden structure, built in the 1970s and upgraded just enough to have electricity and running water. Solar panels on the roof provide power, and a satellite phone serves as my only reliable connection to the outside world. The first week was exactly what I expected. I maintained trails, checked wildlife cameras, and documented flora and fauna. The work was solitary but satisfying. I would hike 20 miles in a day, my boots crunching on fallen leaves, my breath forming clouds in the crisp mountain air. Black bears would occasionally cross my path. Deer would startle at my approach, and hawks circled overhead with lazy precision. It was pristine, untouched wilderness, and I felt privileged to be its guardian. But there were protocols here that seemed unusual from the start. During my orientation, the district supervisor, a grizzled man named Thomas Garrett, handed me a laminated card with a list of rules. He didn't explain them, just told me to keep the card with me at all times and follow every instruction without exception. The rules read: never whistle after sunset. If you hear your name called from the forest, do not respond. It is not who you think it is. Stay on marked trails between the hours of 2 a.m. and 4 a.m. that if you encounter someone hiking alone at night, do not offer assistance. Report their location immediately to D. or not investigate lights in the forest that move against the wind. If the birds suddenly go silent, return to the station immediately. Never follow footprints that lead away from the trail and then simply stop. If you find personal belongings on the trail, bag them and leave them at the station. Do not try to return them to their owners. I remember laughing nervously when I first read them. They seemed like folklore, the kind of superstitious nonsense you'd expect from isolated mountain communities. Thomas didn't laugh. He just stared at me with eyes that had seen too much and said, "You'll understand soon enough. Just follow the rules, Owen. They're written in blood, not ink." The journal started as a way to combat the loneliness. I would write about my daily observations, sketching wildlife tracks and noting weather patterns. It gave structure to the endless solitude. But by the second week, the entries began to change. October 12th. I found a campsite abandoned mid-meal. Coffee still warm in the pot, tent still zipped shut, sleeping bags laid out as if someone had just stepped away. No sign of struggle, no note, nothing missing except the campers themselves. I reported it immediately. Search and rescue found nothing, not a single trace. The investigation was closed after 3 days. Probably hikers who got disoriented, they said, but the coffee was still warm. October 15th. I heard whistling last night. It came from deep in the forest, a cheerful tune that echoed between the trees. I almost whistled back before remembering rule number 1. The whistling continued for hours, always staying just beyond the reach of my flashlight beam. It stopped abruptly at dawn. October 18th. The wildlife cameras captured something I can't explain. At 3:47 a.m., every camera within a 2-mile radius recorded the same thing: a figure standing perfectly still, facing the camera. The image was blurred, as if the figure was vibrating at a frequency the camera couldn't quite capture. But the eyes were clear. They reflected the camera flash with an unnatural brightness, too far apart to be human, too focused to be animal. I started sleeping less. Every creak of the station's wooden frame made me jump. The isolation that had once felt peaceful now felt suffocating. I was being watched. I knew it with the same certainty that I knew the sun would rise. Something in these mountains was aware of me, studying me, waiting for something. October 23rd. I violated rule number 7 today. I found tracks leading off the main trail, bare footprints that were too large to be human, but too human-shaped to be anything else. They walked in a straight line, through thorns and over rocky ground, and then they just stopped. Not faded, not covered by leaves, just stopped as if whoever made them had been lifted into the air. I followed them against my better judgment. At the point where they ended, the ground was scorched in a perfect circle, and the air smelled of burning copper. I ran back to the trail, my heart hammering so hard I thought it would burst. When I looked back, there was something standing at the tree line, watching me retreat. It was too tall, too thin, and it swayed like a reed in the wind, even though the air was perfectly still. The entries became more frequent after that. I needed to document everything, to prove to myself that I wasn't losing my mind. But with each passing day, the line between rational explanation and supernatural horror grew thinner. October 27th. I heard my name last night. Owen, it called in a voice that sounded exactly like my sister's. Owen, I need help. I knew rule number 2. I stayed inside with my hands clamped over my ears while the voice circled the station for hours, becoming more desperate, more angry, before finally fading into the darkness. In the morning, I found handprints on the windows. They had too many fingers. The mountains had stopped being beautiful. Every shadow held menace. Every sound carried threat. I was no longer a ranger protecting the wilderness. I was prey, and something ancient and terrible was hunting me. The journal had become my confessional, the only place I could admit my terror without feeling weak. Because out here, showing fear was dangerous. The mountains could smell it. November 1st. The birds went silent today during my afternoon patrol. Total, absolute silence. I remembered rule number 6 and started running back to the station. I didn't look back, but I could feel something massive moving through the trees parallel to me, keeping pace effortlessly. My lungs burned, my legs screamed, but I didn't stop. I burst through the station door and locked it behind me. For the next 6 hours, something circled the building. I never saw it clearly, just a shadow that was darker than the gathering night, a presence that made the air feel thick and hard to breathe. This journal is my only anchor to sanity now. And if you're reading this, if these entries ever leave this mountain, then know this. The Appalachian wilderness is not empty. It never was. We're the visitors here, tolerated only as long as we follow rules we don't understand, rules written by rangers who learned their lessons too late. The real horror isn't what lurks in the darkness. It's the realization that we were never at the top of the food chain. The November cold settled into the mountains like a living thing, bringing early snow and shorter days that left me trapped in darkness for 16 hours a stretch. The station's heater rattled and wheezed, barely keeping the frost at bay, and I found myself rationing firewood even though the supply shed was fully stocked. Something told me not to go out there after dark anymore, not even for necessities. Intuition, my grandfather used to call it. Survival instinct, more like. November 8th. I broke protocol today and called Thomas on the satellite phone. I needed to hear another human voice, needed confirmation that the outside world still existed. He answered on the 3rd ring, his voice rough and tired. "What's wrong, Fletcher?" I almost laughed. Everything was wrong, but where could I even start? I told him about the cameras, the footprints, the voices. There was a long silence before he spoke again. "You're following the rules. Yes, I told him. Religiously. Good. Keep following them. And Owen, stop looking for explanations. They'll drive you mad. Just survive your shift, and we'll talk when you come down. He hung up before I could ask what he meant. The isolation was becoming psychological torture. I would catch myself having conversations with imagined visitors, arguing with shadows, laughing at jokes no one had told. The journal was my only therapy, the act of writing providing structure to days that otherwise blended into one endless nightmare of vigilance and fear. November 11th. I found something today that changed everything. While checking trail markers on the northern ridge, I discovered an old ranger station that wasn't on any of my maps. It was smaller than mine, little more than a stone shelter built into the mountainside, but it had been abandoned for decades. The door hung from one hinge, and the interior was thick with dust and dead leaves. But there, on a makeshift desk made from stacked rocks, was another journal. The handwriting was shaky, the pages water-damaged and brittle, but the name inside the front cover was clear: Jonathan Reeves, 1982. I sat in that ruined station as the afternoon light faded and read every word. Jonathan had been a ranger too, stationed in this same sector 40 years ago. His entries started the same as mine, normal observations about wildlife and weather. Then they changed. The same patterns, the same rules, the same growing horror. His final entry was dated December 3rd, 1982. They showed themselves to me tonight. I understand now. We're not protecting the wilderness from people. We're protecting people from the wilderness. The rules exist because rangers before me learned what happens when they're broken. I broke rule number 4 last week. I offered help to a hiker at night. He smiled at me with too many teeth and followed me back to the station. He's still outside. He's been outside for 3 days, knocking on the door, asking to come in, wearing the face of my dead father. I can't leave. I can't call for help. All I can do is wait for my replacement and pray he's smarter than I was. If you're reading this, new ranger, follow the rules. All of them. Every single time. The price of failure is worse than death. The journal ended there. I searched the shelter, but found nothing else. No sign of what happened to Jonathan Reeves. According to official records I checked later, he was listed as having resigned his position in December 1982. No forwarding address. No next of kin contacted. But I knew the truth. Jonathan never left these mountains. His body was probably still out there somewhere, claimed by whatever walked between the trees. November 15th. I'm not alone in the station anymore. I can't see anything, can't point to any concrete evidence, but I know something has crossed the threshold. The air feels different, heavier, and there's a smell I can't identify, like ozone mixed with decay. Objects move when I'm not looking. My coffee mug was on the desk this morning. I know I left it in the kitchen. The bathroom door was locked from the inside yesterday, even though I was the only person here. Small things, easily dismissed individually, but together they paint a picture I don't want to see. The nights were the worst. I would lie in my cot, staring at the ceiling, listening to the sounds of the station settling. Except stations don't breathe. They don't whisper in languages that predate human speech. They don't walk with measured steps across the floor upstairs when there is no upstairs. November 18th. I saw it tonight. Not clearly, never clearly, but enough. I was lying awake around 3 a.m., staring at the darkened window beside my cot, when movement caught my eye. A face pressed against the glass from outside, pale and elongated, with eyes that caught the faint moonlight like an animal's. But the window was 12 feet off the ground. Nothing could reach it without a ladder. The face tilted sideways, studying me with an intelligence that was utterly alien. Then it smiled. The smile kept growing, stretching wider than any human mouth should stretch, revealing row after row of teeth. I closed my eyes and recited the rules in my head like a prayer until the presence faded. In the morning, there were handprints on the window. Not on the outside, on the inside. November 22nd. The wildlife is gone. I haven't seen a single animal in 5 days. No birds, no deer, no squirrels. The forest is empty except for me and them. Even the insects have fled. I checked the wildlife cameras and found them all destroyed, torn from their mounts and smashed. All except one. The last camera, the one overlooking the clearing where I found the burned circle, was still functioning. I reviewed the footage and immediately wished I hadn't. For 6 hours last night, figures gathered in that clearing. Dozens of them, standing in concentric circles around something in the center that the camera couldn't quite focus on. They swayed in unison, and even though there was no audio, I could imagine the sound they were making, a low droning that would vibrate in your bones and scramble your thoughts. The camera's timestamp showed 2 a.m. to 4 a.m., the forbidden hours, the hours when I was supposed to stay on marked trails. Now I understood why. Those hours belonged to them. November 25th. I'm rationing food now, not because I'm running low, but because I can't trust what's in the supply shed anymore. I went out this morning to get canned goods and found the shed door wide open, snow blown inside. Nothing was missing, but everything had been moved. The cans were arranged in patterns I didn't understand, symbols that hurt to look at directly. I grabbed what I needed and ran back to the station, and I swear I heard laughter echoing from the trees. The satellite phone hasn't worked in 3 days. Every time I try to call out, all I get is static, and underneath it, very faintly, voices speaking in harmony, calling my name. November 28th. I understand now why the rules exist, and I understand that following them is the only thing keeping me alive. But I also understand something else, something that Jonathan Rees learned too late. The rules are not protection. They're negotiations. Treaties signed in the blood of previous rangers. Agreements made with entities that see us as temporary inconveniences at best and prey at worst. Every rule followed is an acknowledgement of their dominance, an admission that this land is theirs and we exist here only by their sufferance. Tonight, something knocked on my door exactly 12 times. Between each knock was exactly 5 seconds of silence. I counted them, my hand gripping a flashlight like it was a weapon. The knocking stopped, and a voice spoke through the door. It was my voice, my exact voice, asking to be let in because it was cold outside. I didn't answer. I couldn't answer, because rule number 2 says if you hear your name called, it's not who you think it is. And if your own voice is calling to you, what does that mean? The journal pages are filling faster now. I write to stay sane, to prove to myself that I'm still human, still rational. But rationality is a luxury I can no longer afford. The only thing that matters is survival. And survival means following rules I don't understand, created by people who are probably dead, to appease things that should not exist. 3 more weeks until my rotation ends. 3 more weeks until I can leave this mountain and pretend this never happened. But Jonathan's journal had only 3 weeks left too, and he never made it down. I'm starting to think none of us do. December arrived with a blizzard that cut me off from the outside world completely. The snow fell in thick, suffocating sheets, piling up against the station until I could barely see out the windows. The solar panels were buried, leaving me with only emergency batteries and dwindling firewood. But the isolation wasn't what terrified me anymore. It was the realization that I was trapped here with them, and the storm had made me more vulnerable than ever. December 2nd. The power died last night. One moment I was reading by lamplight. The next I was plunged into absolute darkness. The kind of darkness that's so complete it feels solid, pressing against your eyes. I fumbled for my flashlight, and when I finally got on, I saw that every window was completely frosted over from the inside, despite the heater having been running moments before. I could see my breath, thick clouds of condensation, and the temperature had dropped at least 30 degrees in seconds. Then I heard it. Footsteps on the roof. Slow, measured, deliberate. Something was walking up there, pacing back and forth, and the weight of it made the ceiling beams creak. I stood frozen in the center of the room, flashlight beam shaking in my trembling hand, listening to whatever was above me move with purpose. It stopped directly over my head, and I could hear breathing through the wooden planks. Not human breathing, something that sounded wet and labored, like lungs filled with fluid struggling to function. 3 drops of something dark fell from the ceiling and landed on the floor at my feet. I didn't examine them. I didn't want to know. The thing stayed on the roof until dawn, and I stayed exactly where I was, not moving, barely breathing, praying to gods I didn't believe in. When the first gray light of morning finally penetrated the frosted windows, the footsteps retreated, moving toward the edge of the roof and then stopping. In the silence that followed, I heard something that will haunt me forever. The sound of wings unfurling, massive and leathery, followed by the whoosh of something enormous taking flight. December 5th. I'm breaking. I can feel it happening, my mind fracturing under the constant pressure of fear and isolation. I talk to myself now, full conversations with imagined companions. Sometimes I argue with them. Sometimes I catch myself answering questions no one asked. The line between sleep and waking has blurred. I have dreams where I'm walking the trails, following the rules, doing my job, and then I wake up to find myself standing in the snow outside the station in my bare feet, frostbite already setting into my toes, with no memory of how I got there. The journal is the only thing keeping me tethered to reality. When I write, I'm human. When I write, I have purpose. When I write, I'm not one of them. December 8th. I found bodies today. I shouldn't have gone out, shouldn't have left the station during daylight hours with the storm still raging, but I needed firewood desperately. The temperature inside had dropped to just above freezing, and I could see my breath continuously. I bundled up in every layer I owned and ventured out to the supply shed, following the rope line I'd strung between the buildings. The shed door was open again, snow piled inside, but that wasn't what made me stop. There were shapes in the snow beyond the shed, dark forms barely visible through the blizzard. My rational mind said they were rocks or fallen trees, but something deeper knew the truth. I approached slowly, my flashlight cutting through the swirling white, and that's when I saw them. 3 bodies, frozen solid, positioned in a triangle around a 4th figure in the center. The bodies were wrong. Their limbs were bent at impossible angles, their faces locked in expressions of absolute terror, their mouths open in silent screams. But it was the 4th figure that made me collapse to my knees in the snow. It was me, an exact replica of me, down to the scar on my chin from a childhood accident, wearing my ranger uniform, my badge, my boots. But its eyes were wrong. They were black, completely black, and they tracked me as I stared at it. The figure smiled, and when it spoke, it was my voice. Follow the rules, Owen. Follow the rules, or take your place in the circle. Then it was gone, vanished between one blink and the next, leaving only the 3 frozen bodies arranged in their perfect triangle. I ran back to the station, my lungs burning from the cold air, my mind screaming. I didn't look back. I couldn't look back, because I knew if I did, I would see myself standing there in the snow, smiling with too many teeth, waiting for me to break just one more rule. December 11th. The bodies are gone. I went back to the location the next day, following my own footprints in the snow, but there was nothing there. No bodies, no disturbed snow, no evidence that anything had happened at all. But I know what I saw. The images are burned into my memory with perfect clarity. I'm not hallucinating. I'm not losing my mind. This is real. All of it is real. I've started barricading the door at night, pushing furniture against it even though I know it won't stop them if they decide to come in. They could have taken me 100 times by now if they wanted to, but they don't want to take me. They want me to break. They want me to violate the rules, to give them permission to cross whatever boundary the rules represent. The treaties hold, but only if I hold to my end of the bargain. December 14th. Something changed tonight. At exactly midnight, all sound stopped. Not gradually, Not naturally, but instantly. The wind died. The station's groaning and creaking ceased. Even my own heartbeat became silent in my ears. I stood in the center of the room, surrounded by absolute quiet, and then I heard it, a single voice, clear and commanding, speaking directly into my mind. 3 days, Owen Fletcher. 3 days, and your rotation ends. 3 days, and you can leave. But the question is, will we let you? The voice laughed, and the sound was picked up by other voices, dozens of them, hundreds, until the laughter surrounded me from all directions. It echoed inside the station, inside my skull, filling every empty space with mocking amusement. I collapsed to the floor with my hands over my ears, screaming, but I couldn't hear my own voice over their laughter. When it finally stopped, hours later, I found myself curled in the corner, my throat raw from screaming, my fingernails bloody from where I clawed at my ears. A message was written on the wall in front of me, in letters that looked burned into the wood. Rules can be broken. Rangers can be replaced. Which will happen first? December 16th. 1 day left. 24 hours until the replacement ranger is scheduled to arrive, until I can leave this nightmare behind and return to civilization. But they know. They've always known. This is the test, the final trial, the moment where every ranger either survives or becomes another Jonathan Reeves, another name in a list of people who resigned and disappeared without a trace. I've read Jonathan's journal a dozen times, searching for clues about how to survive this last day. But his final entry was written on day 3, just like mine will be. Whatever happens in these final hours is something each ranger faces alone, and those who survive never speak of it. The rules are still taped to the wall, laminated and clear, but I've noticed something. There's an 8th rule, written in pencil at the bottom, so faint I missed it before. If you make it to the end, don't look back when you leave. They hate being ignored most of all. Night is falling again, the last night, and I can feel them gathering outside. The trees are full of shapes that don't belong, shadows that move against the wind, eyes that reflect the faint light from my windows with colors that don't exist in nature. They're waiting, watching, anticipating. I don't know if I'll survive the night. I don't know if this journal will ever leave this mountain. But if you're reading this, if somehow these words reached you, then know this. The rules are real. The things in the Appalachian wilderness are real. And the next time you're hiking alone in the mountains, pay attention to the silence. Because when the birds stop singing, you're already being hunted. December 17th, 6 p.m. The sun disappeared behind the mountains an hour ago, and the darkness that followed feels different tonight. Thicker, more purposeful. I've checked and rechecked the barricade on the door, inventoried my supplies, and positioned flashlights around the room so I'm never more than an arm's length from light. The rules card sits in my lap, and I've read it so many times the words have lost meaning, becoming a mantra against the encroaching madness. My replacement, Daniel Cross, is scheduled to arrive at 9 a.m. tomorrow morning. 15 hours. I just need to survive 15 hours, and I'm free. But the station feels smaller tonight, the walls closer, as if the building itself is contracting around me. Every shadow seems deeper, every sound amplified. The wind outside is picked up, howling through the trees with a voice that's almost words, almost language, almost human. 7:30 p.m. The knocking started, not at the door this time, but on every surface simultaneously. Walls, floor, ceiling, windows. A rhythmic pounding that has no source, coming from inside the very structure of the building. I'm sitting in the center of the room, as far from any surface as possible, trying to focus on my breathing. The rules say nothing about knocking. I don't have to respond. I don't have to acknowledge it. I just have to endure. The knocking has developed a pattern. 3 slow knocks, pause. 3 fast knocks, pause. 3 slow knocks. Over and over. It's deliberate, intelligent, designed to fray my nerves. I'm counting my breaths, trying to stay calm. One breath in, one breath out. The knocking can't hurt me. It's just sound. Just sound. 9:15 p.m. The knocking stopped an hour ago, replaced by something worse. Silence. Total, absolute silence. No wind, no settling wood, no distant wildlife. The kind of silence that presses against your eardrums, that makes you question whether you've gone deaf. I tested it by dropping a pin, and I heard it hit the floor, so my hearing still works. But everything outside the station has gone quiet. They're out there. I know they are. I can feel their attention focused on this building, on me, like heat from spotlight. I'm riding to stay awake. If I fall asleep tonight, I don't think I'll wake up. Or worse, I'll wake up as something else, another figure standing in the snow, wearing my face, waiting to greet the next ranger who takes this position. 10:47 p.m. I violated rule number 1. I didn't mean to. I was so focused on staying alert, so desperate to fill the silence with something human, that I started whistling without thinking. Just a simple tune my mother used to sing, a melody from childhood that surfaced from some deep corner of my memory. I realized what I was doing after 3 notes, and my blood turned to ice. The response was immediate. Every window of the station exploded inward simultaneously, glass shards flying through the air like shrapnel. I threw myself to the floor, covering my head, feeling fragments pelt my back and arms. Cold air rushed in, and with it came the smell, that awful combination of ozone and decay that I'd learned to associate with their presence. When I dared to look up, they were there, in every window, pressing against the frames, their forms still indistinct but more visible than I'd ever seen them. Tall, impossibly thin, with limbs that had too many joints and faces that were almost human but wrong in ways I can't articulate. Their eyes glowed with a sickly phosphorescence, and they were all staring at me with what I can only describe as hungry anticipation. One of them spoke. "You called us, Owen. You broke the first rule. The treaty is void." Its voice was a chorus, multiple tones speaking in harmony, and I felt it in my chest like a physical vibration. I scrambled backward, pressing myself against the far wall, and held up the rules card like a talisman. I didn't know. I shouted, my voice breaking. It was an accident. I didn't mean to break the rule. The creatures tilted their heads in unison, an eerily synchronized movement. Intent is irrelevant. Rules are absolute. You have opened the door, and now we may enter. But they didn't enter. They stayed at the windows, watching, waiting. And that's when I understood. The rules were written by previous rangers who had learned through trial and error what these things could and couldn't do. Breaking a rule gave them permission to act, but there were still limits. They couldn't just take me. I had to let them in. I had to break more rules to erode the protection further. "No," I said, forcing strength into my voice I didn't feel. "No, you can't come in. I didn't invite you. I broke one rule by accident, but the others still hold. You can't enter without my permission." The creatures withdrew slightly, their forms receding from the windows, and I heard that terrible chorus laughter again. Clever human. Weak, frightened, but clever. But the night is long, Owen Fletcher, and you are so very tired. How long can you stay awake? How long can you resist? They vanished, melting back into the darkness, but I knew they hadn't gone far. The game had changed. They were hunting me now, actively trying to make me break more rules, to erode the protection until nothing stood between us. 11:59 p.m. I'm fortifying my position. I've pushed the desk against the broken windows, hung blankets over the frames to block the wind and the view of what waits outside. The temperature has dropped dramatically, and I can see my breath in thick clouds. I'm burning papers and pieces of broken furniture in the fireplace, trying to stay warm, trying to stay alert. My watch shows 1 minute until midnight. 1 minute until I enter the forbidden hours, the time between 2 a.m. and 4 a.m. when I'm supposed to stay on marked trails. But I'm not on a trail. I'm in the station, technically violating rule number 3 by default. Or does the rule only apply if I'm outside? The wording is ambiguous, and that ambiguity might kill me. The second hand sweeps toward 12, and I grip the flashlight tighter, my only weapon against the dark. Midnight arrives, and with it comes a sound that turns my bowels to water. Footsteps inside the station, coming from the room above, the room that doesn't exist because this is a single-story building. 1:34 a.m. The footsteps have been pacing overhead for over an hour. Back and forth, each step deliberate and heavy. Dust falls from the ceiling with each impact, and I position myself beneath the strongest beam, praying that whatever is up there doesn't come through the roof. But worse than the footsteps is what I'm hearing in the walls. Scratching, scraping, like something with claws is moving through the space between the studs, circling the room, searching for a way in. The sounds move with intelligence, pausing at each corner, testing weak points, learning the structure. I'm reciting the rules out loud, over and over, like a protective spell. Never whistle after sunset. If you hear your name called, don't respond. Stay on marked trails between 2 a.m. and 4 a.m. Each rule is a link in a chain keeping me alive, and I can't let that chain break. 2:22 a.m. I saw my family. They appeared outside the blanket-covered windows, their faces pressed against the fabric, their voices calling to me. My mother, my father, my sister Emma, all of them begging me to let them in, telling me they'd driven up to surprise me, that they were freezing in the snow, that I needed to help them. It was so convincing. The voices were perfect, every inflection identical to my memories. I actually stood up, started moving toward the window to help them before I caught myself. Rule number 4. If you encounter someone at night, do not offer assistance. And rule number 2. If you hear your name called, it's not who you think it is. I sat back down, covered my ears, and tried not to listen to my mother's voice growing more desperate, more accusatory. Owen, why won't you help us? We're your family. We're dying out here. And you're just sitting inside where it's warm. What kind of son are you? The words cut deeper than any physical weapon, but I held firm. They were my family. My family was safe in Tennessee, probably asleep in their beds, unaware of the horror their son was facing. These were imitations, cruel puppets worn by things that wanted to exploit my love and guilt. The voices continued for 20 minutes before finally fading away, replaced by disappointed sighs that seemed to come from everywhere at once. I'd passed another test, but the night was far from over. 3:15 a.m. 45 minutes left of the forbidden hours. 45 minutes until 4 a.m., when the rules shift again, when whatever dark power controls this time releases its grip slightly. I'm so tired. My eyes keep trying to close. My head keeps nodding forward, and I have to jerk myself awake every few seconds. Sleep will be surrender. Sleep will be death. The entity above has stopped pacing. It's standing directly over me now. I can tell by the way the ceiling beam has bowed slightly under sustained weight. I can hear breathing again, that wet, labored sound, and I realize it's waiting. Waiting for me to fall asleep, waiting for me to make a mistake, waiting for any opportunity to claim me. I stand up, ignoring my trembling legs, and start doing jumping jacks. The physical activity helps, flooding my system with adrenaline, pushing back the exhaustion. I look ridiculous, I'm sure, jumping around in a destroyed ranger station at 3 a.m, but dignity is a luxury I can't afford. 3:58 a.m. 2 minutes, 120 seconds. I'm counting each second, watching my watch face like it's the only thing in the universe that matters. The scratching in the walls has intensified, becoming frantic, desperate. Whatever is in there knows its time is running out, knows that at 4 a.m. the rules shift and the protection strengthens. The breathing above has turned to growling, a sound so deep I feel in my bones. The ceiling beam cracks, splinters of wood raining down, and I scramble to the side, just as something massive impacts the ceiling from above. The entire structure shudders, but the beam holds. 30 seconds. I'm standing now, flashlight raised like a weapon, watching the ceiling buckle and warp under impossible weight. 15 seconds. The growling becomes a roar, and I see claws punch through the plaster, black and curved and dripping with something viscous. 10 seconds. Not today. I whisper. Not tonight. Not ever. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. 4 a.m. arrives, and everything stops. The claws retract. The weight lifts. The scratching ceases. Silence falls again, but this time it's different. This time it feels like relief, like the darkness itself is exhaling, retreating, acknowledging temporary defeat. I collapse to my knees, gasping, my entire body shaking with exhaustion and residual terror. But I'm alive. I survived the forbidden hours. 5 hours until dawn. 5 hours until Daniel Cross arrives. 5 hours until I can leave this place forever. 4:47 a.m. I'm using this quiet time to document everything, to ensure that if something goes wrong in these final hours, there's a record. Daniel needs to know what he's walking into. Every ranger does. The rules aren't enough. Context matters. Understanding matters. The things in these mountains aren't mindless monsters. They're intelligent, patient, and they play by rules we barely understand. But they do play by rules, and that's the only reason any of us survive. I'm also realizing something else. Jonathan Reeves probably survived his last night too. The fact that his journal ended on day 3 doesn't mean he died that night. It means he stopped writing, stopped documenting, because he knew that what came next was something words couldn't capture. The final test isn't surviving the night. It's what happens in the morning, in those last moments before freedom. 5:30 a.m. False dawn is lightening the sky, that gray pre-sunrise glow that promises day is coming. I've pulled away the blankets from the windows, and I can see the forest again. It looks normal, peaceful even, as if the horrors of the night were nothing but fevered imagination. But I can see them too, if I look carefully. Shapes among the trees, standing perfectly still, watching the station with patient attention. They're waiting for something. I'm going to make coffee. It seems absurd, maintaining normalcy in the face of what I've experienced. But I need the ritual. I need to prove to myself that I'm still human, still capable of ordinary actions. The camp stove still works, and I have water. Simple pleasures before the final test. 6:15 a.m. The coffee is bitter and perfect, and I'm sitting at the desk watching the sun actually rise above the mountains for the first time in what feels like years. The shapes in the forest are receding, fading into shadow as daylight strengthens. They don't like the sun, I've noticed. They can exist in it, but they don't thrive. Daylight weakens them, forces them back into the margins. But they're not gone. They're never gone. They're just waiting, always waiting. 7 a.m., 2 hours until Daniel arrives. I've started packing my personal belongings, stuffing clothes and equipment into my duffel bag with shaking hands. I'm leaving the journal on the desk where I found Jonathan's, along with a note explaining where to find his. Let Daniel decide what to do with them. Let him learn the truth the same way I did. Every instinct is screaming at me to run, to start hiking down the mountain road right now, to put distance between myself and this cursed station. But something tells me that would be a mistake. The things outside are expecting me to run. They're positioned along the trails, ready to intercept anyone foolish enough to leave early. No, I need to wait for Daniel. Safety in numbers, and he'll have the district vehicle. We can drive down together, and I'll be gone from here before noon. 8:15 a.m. I can hear an engine in the distance, the distinctive rumble of the Forestry Service truck grinding up the mountain road. Daniel is early, thank God. 45 minutes early. which means 45 fewer minutes I have to spend in this place. I'm standing by the door, duffel bag in hand, ready to leave the moment he pulls up. The engine noise grows louder, closer, and I can see a dust trail through the trees as the truck navigates the switchbacks. Almost here, almost free. My heart is pounding with anticipation, with the first real hope I've felt in weeks. The truck pulls into the clearing in front of the station, and I see Daniel behind the wheel. Young guy, mid-20s, eager expression, probably excited about his first assignment. He doesn't know. Thomas wouldn't have told him. They never tell us. We have to learn for ourselves, and those who don't learn fast enough don't last. I step outside, feeling genuine sunlight on my face for the first time in too long, and start walking toward the truck. Daniel opens his door, starts to get out, raising his hand in greeting. "Hey, you must be Owen Fletcher. I'm Daniel Cross, your replacement, ready to head down." I'm 20 feet from the truck when I remember. Rule number 8, the one written in pencil. So faint I almost missed it. If you make it to the end, don't look back when you leave. They hate being ignored most of all. Don't look back. I'm so focused on remembering the rule, so relieved to be leaving, that I almost don't notice what's wrong. But some survival instinct, honed by weeks of terror, makes me stop, makes me really look at Daniel Cross. His shadow is pointing the wrong direction. The sun is behind him, but his shadow stretches toward the sun, not away from it. I take a step back, and Daniel's smile widens. Too wide. Something wrong, Owen. You look like you've seen a ghost. His voice is right, but there's something underneath it, a harmonics that doesn't belong. You're not Daniel Cross, I say quietly. The thing wearing Daniel's face tilts its head. Aren't I? I have his memories, his appearance, his voice. I drove his truck up the mountain. How am I not Daniel Cross? Where is he? The real Daniel. Safe. For now. Whether he stays safe depends on you. Owen Fletcher. It takes a step toward me, and I see now that its movements are slightly off, joints bending at angles that are almost right, but not quite. You survived the night. You followed the rules. You earned your freedom. But there's one more choice to make. One more rule to follow or break. I'm backing toward the station, hand reaching for the door. What choice? Get in the truck with me, or wait for the Real Daniel Cross. He'll be here in exactly 1 hour. Get in the truck, and you leave now. You're free, but you'll never know if I let the Real Daniel go, or if I'm wearing his face because I already took him. Wait, and you know Daniel is safe, but you spend 1 more hour in this place. 1 more hour where anything could happen. It's the final test. The thing is offering me freedom at the cost of uncertainty, or certainty at the cost of more time in hell. And I realize this is what broke Jonathan Reeves. This is the choice that determines whether you leave the mountain or become another disappeared ranger. I look at the fake Daniel, at the wrong shadow, and the almost right movements, and I make my decision. I'll wait. I say, I'll wait for the real Daniel. The thing's face doesn't change, but I sense disappointment. Interesting choice. Most rangers take the truck. Most rangers are so desperate to leave that they don't care about the consequences. It walks back to the truck, gets in, and starts the engine. 1 hour, Owen Fletcher. We'll be watching. The truck pulls away, leaving me standing alone in the clearing. I check my watch. 8:27 a.m. 1 hour until 9:27. 60 more minutes in the Appalachian wilderness. I go back inside the station and sit at the desk, journal open, pen in hand. If I don't make it, if something happens in this last hour, at least there will be a record. At least the next ranger will know that the tests don't end when the sun rises, that the final trial comes when you think you're safe. But I also write this. I chose to wait. I chose to protect Daniel Cross, even though I don't know him, even though it meant extending my own suffering. And in that choice, I found something these mountains can't take from me. Humanity, compassion, the refusal to let fear turn me into something as monstrous as the things that hunt us. 1 hour. I could survive one more hour. 9:15 a.m. 12 minutes left. The longest 12 minutes of my life. I've been sitting at the desk, journal open, watching the second hand of my watch make its slow circuit. The station is quiet now, but it's the quiet of observation, not peace. I can feel eyes on me from the forest, patient and calculating. They're waiting to see if I'll break, if the pressure of these final minutes will make me do something stupid. I won't give them the satisfaction. The coffee has gone cold in my cup, but I sip it anyway, savoring the bitter taste. It's real. It's normal. It's proof that somewhere beyond these mountains, ordinary life continues. People are going to work, drinking coffee, complaining about traffic. They have no idea that places like this exist, that there are thin places in the world where ancient things still hold power. 9:23 a.m. For minutes. I can hear an engine again, this one different from the fake Daniel's truck. It's real this time. I can tell by the way the forest responds. The oppressive weight lifts slightly, and I sense the things in the trees withdrawing, retreating to safer distances. They won't interfere with the actual transfer. That's part of the agreement, part of the rules that govern this place. Rangers can leave at the end of their rotation, as long as they survive to see it. I stand, shouldering my duffel bag, and walk to the door. My hand is on the knob when I hear it. My own voice coming from upstairs, from the room that doesn't exist. Owen, don't go. You belong here now. Stay with us. Stay forever. I close my eyes and recite rule number 2 in my head. It's not who you think it is. It's never who you think it is. I open the door and step outside without responding. The truck pulls into the clearing, and this time I can see the difference immediately. The young man behind the wheel has a shadow that falls correctly, movements that are entirely natural. This is the Real Daniel Cross, and the relief that floods through me almost brings me to my knees. He parks and gets out, looking around with the wide-eyed wonder of someone seeing the mountain for the first time. Wow, he says, this place is incredible, so remote, so peaceful. Peaceful. If only he knew. Daniel Cross. I ask, needing to be sure, needing to hear him confirm it. That's me, and your Owen Fletcher. He extends his hand, and I shake it. His grip is firm, his palm warm. Real. Human. Thomas told me you'd give me the rundown before heading out. Show me where everything is. Explain the protocols. I almost laugh. Protocols. The rules card in my pocket feels like it weighs 1,000 pounds. Yeah, I say. I'll show you everything. But first, let's get my gear in the truck. I'm ready to head down. We load my duffel bag, and I take one last look at the station. It seems so ordinary in the morning light. Just a weathered wooden structure in a forest clearing. Nothing about it suggests the horrors it contains, the things that prowl around it after dark. But I know the truth. This building is a fortress, the last line of defense between rangers and the ancient things that rule these mountains. So, Daniel says, leaning against the truck, Thomas mentioned there are some unusual protocols here, special rules to follow. I pull out the laminated card and hand it to him. He reads it, his expression shifting from curiosity to confusion to nervous laughter. This is a joke, right? Some kind of hazing for new rangers. I look him in the eyes, and whatever he sees in my face kills his smile. No joke, I say quietly. Follow every rule. No exceptions. No matter what you hear, what you see, what you think you understand. The rules are the only thing keeping you alive. He swallows hard, studying the card again. Thomas said you were a good ranger. Level-headed. You thought I'd tell you it's superstition, that it's just local folklore meant to scare newcomers. I shake my head. I thought that too at first. You'll learn. Everyone does. Just follow the rules, Daniel. Please. I walk back into the station, and he follows. I show him where the supplies are kept, how to work the satellite phone, where the emergency equipment is stored. All the practical, mundane details of being a ranger. But I also show him Jonathan Reeves' journal and my own, both laid out on the desk. Read these, I tell him. Read them tonight, before your first sunset here. They'll help you understand what you're dealing with. Daniel picks up my journal, flipping through the pages, his eyes widening as he reads random passages. This is insane. This can't be real. You're telling me there are actually. I'm not telling you anything, I interrupt. The journals speak for themselves. Believe them or don't, but follow the rules. We spend another hour going through the station, and I answer his questions as honestly as I can without sounding completely mad. He's skeptical. I can see in his eyes, but there's also fear there. Some part of him, the primitive part that remembers when humans were prey, knows I'm telling the truth. Finally, it's time to leave. I pick up my duffel bag and walk toward the truck, forcing myself to move at normal pace. Every instinct screams at me to run, to sprint to the vehicle and demand we leave immediately. But I maintain control. Show weakness here, and they'll know. They'll remember. Daniel walks beside me, still asking questions about maintenance schedules and wildlife patterns, normal ranger concerns. I answer automatically, but my attention is on the forest. The shapes are there, barely visible among the trees, watching our departure with interest. They're closer than they should be in daylight, testing boundaries, seeing how close they can get. We reach the truck, and I open the passenger door. Before I get in, I turn back to the station one last time. A figure stands in the doorway. It's wearing my face, my uniform, and it raises one hand in a mocking wave. I resist the urge to respond, to acknowledge it. Rule number 8, don't look back. But I've already looked, haven't I? I've already broken the final rule. The figure's smile widens, and it mouths words I can read clearly. See you soon, Owen. I get in the truck and close the door. Drive, I tell Daniel. Drive now. He gives me a concerned look, but starts the engine. We pull out of the clearing, onto the dirt road that winds down the mountain. I keep my eyes forward, watching the road, refusing to look in the mirrors of what might be following us. The first mile passes in silence. The second mile, the forest starts to thin. By the third mile, we're descending out of the deepest wilderness, and I can breathe again. By the fifth mile, I can see signs of civilization, a hiking trail marker, a distant sign for the nearest town. Daniel finally speaks. Owen, what happened to you up there? Really happened. I consider lying, consider telling him it was just the isolation, just the loneliness playing tricks on my mind. But he deserves the truth. He deserves to be prepared. Everything in those journals happened, I say, and more that I didn't write down because I didn't have words for it. The mountains are alive, Daniel. Not metaphorically, actually alive. And they're inhabited by things that were old when humans first learned to make fire. The rules exist because previous rangers figured out how to coexist with them, how to survive. Follow the rules, and you'll make it to the end of your rotation. Break them, and I trail off, unable to finish the sentence. And what? And you'll understand why there's such high turnover for this position. We drive in silence for another 10 miles. The road improves, pavement replacing dirt, and I see the first house, a cabin nestled in a valley. Human habitation, safety. The tight band around my chest finally loosens, and I realize I'm going to make it. I actually survived. But as we approach the Ranger District headquarters, where Thomas is waiting to debrief me, I can't shake the feeling that something followed us down. That the figure wearing my face wasn't content to let me go. Rule number 8 didn't say don't look back or you'll die. It said they hate being ignored, which means I didn't break the treaty by looking back. I just made them angry. We pull into the headquarters parking lot, and Thomas is standing on the porch, smoking a cigarette. He looks older than I remember, more worn, and when he sees me, relief crosses his face. He didn't know if I'd make it. Nobody ever knows. I get out of the truck, my legs unsteady on flat ground, and Thomas walks over. He doesn't say anything, just pulls me into a brief, rough hug. When he steps back, his eyes are searching my face. You made it, he says simply. Barely. That's all that matters. Barely is enough. He glances at Daniel, who's getting my gear from the truck bed. You brief him. Showed him the journals. Told him to follow the rules. Thomas nods. Good. He'll learn the rest the hard way. They all do. He pauses, studying me carefully. How bad was it? Bad enough that I'm done. I quit, Thomas. I can't go back up there. Not ever. I expect him to argue, to tell me we need experienced rangers, that I can't quit. But he just nods again, understanding in his eyes. Yeah, most people who survive a full rotation say the same thing. I'll start the paperwork. You're officially relieved of duty. Relief should flood through me, but it doesn't. Because as Thomas speaks, I see something over his shoulder. In the window of the headquarters building, reflected in the glass, is a figure standing behind me. Tall, thin, wrong. When I spin around, there's nothing there. But I saw it. I know I saw it. Owen, Thomas says, concerned. You okay? I look back. I whisper. At the station, when we were leaving, I looked back, and one of them was there, wearing my face. Rule number 8 says don't look back. Thomas's expression darkens. The 8th rule is different from the others. It's not about survival. It's about what happens after. Looking back means they remember you. It means you're marked. Marked how? They'll follow you. Not physically, but in other ways. Dreams. Coincidences. You'll see things that remind you of the mountains. Hear sounds that shouldn't be in the city. They'll never let you forget that you were in their territory, that you survived when you shouldn't have. Most rangers who look back end up going back to the mountains eventually. The pull becomes too strong. I feel cold despite the warm afternoon sun. I'm not going back. I won't. That's what Jonathan Reed said too. That's what every ranger says. But the mountains get inside you, Owen. They change you. And once you're changed, ordinary life doesn't fit anymore. You'll see. Over the next week, as I processed out of the ranger service and prepared to return to my old life, I discovered Thomas was right. The nightmares started immediately. Every night, I was back in station, back in the darkness, listening to things circle outside. I would wake up gasping, my sheets soaked with sweat, absolutely certain that something was standing in the corner of my bedroom watching me. During the day, I would see them in crowds. A face that was almost human, but not quite. A shadow that fell the wrong direction. A reflection in a window that showed something other than reality. Always at the edge of my vision. Always gone when I looked directly at them. They were reminding me that I belonged to the mountains now, whether I wanted to or not. I tried to ignore it, tried to build a normal life. I got an apartment in the city, took a job in IT, dated a woman named Rebecca who knew nothing about my time in the Appalachians. But the pull was always there, a constant ache like homesickness, except I was sick for a place that had tried to kill me. 6 months after leaving the mountains, I received a package. No return address, just my name written in handwriting I recognized. My own handwriting. Inside was my journal, the one I had left at the station for Daniel. And tucked between the pages was a note, written on Ranger Service letterhead. Owen, I lasted 3 months. I followed the rules. I survived, but I can't stay. Nobody can stay long term. We need someone who understands, someone who knows how to survive up here. The position is open again. Thomas says you're welcome back anytime. The mountains are calling. I think you hear them too. Daniel, I should have thrown the journal away. Should have burned it and tried to forget. But instead, I found myself reading it, reliving every terrifying moment, and feeling something I hadn't expected, longing. Because as horrible as those months were, they were also real in a way nothing in my ordinary life was. Down here in the city, surrounded by millions of people, I felt more alone than I ever did in that isolated station. The mountains had marked me, just like Thomas said, and marks like that don't fade. It's been a year now since I left the Appalachians. I still have nightmares, still see them at the edges of my vision, still feel the pull, stronger with each passing day. Rebecca left me 3 months ago, saying I was distant, always somewhere else mentally. She was right. I'm always somewhere else. I'm in the mountains, where I belong. I've started corresponding with Thomas again, asking about the station, about whether anyone has taken the position. He tells me no, that they're having trouble finding qualified candidates willing to take such a remote posting. He doesn't ask me to come back. He doesn't have to. We both know I will eventually, because that's what the eighth rule really means. Don't look back, because looking back means acknowledging them, accepting them, becoming part of their world. And once you're part of that world, you can never fully leave it. I'm writing this final entry as a warning. If you're offered a position as a ranger in the remote Appalachian wilderness, think carefully before accepting. If you take the job, follow the rules absolutely. And if you somehow survive your rotation, for God's sake, don't look back when you leave. Because some doors, once opened, can never be fully closed. The mountains are calling me again. I can hear them in my dreams, in the rustle of leaves outside my apartment, in the shadows that lengthen as evening falls. And I know, with absolute certainty, that one day, soon I'll answer that call. I'll drive back up that winding mountain road, back to the station, back to the place where I'm most terrified and most alive. The Appalachian wilderness holds secrets older than human civilization. It's inhabited by things that should not exist. And once those things mark you as theirs, you belong to them forever. This is my testimony. This is my warning. And if you're reading this, if these words somehow reached you, then know that the rules are real, the threats are real, and the mountains always claim what belongs to them in the end. I'll see you in the wilderness, whether I want or not. The journal ends here, but the story doesn't. It never does, because there are always more rangers, always more people drawn to remote places, always more individuals who don't believe the warnings until it's too late. The Appalachian Mountains stand eternal, patient, waiting for the next person to break the rules. And somewhere in those mountains, in a remote ranger station that appears on no official maps, something wearing Owen Fletcher's face stands in the doorway, waiting, watching, ready to greet the next ranger who accepts the position, ready to teach them the rules, ready to mark them forever. The mountains never let go. They never forget. And they're always hungry for someone new. Are you ready to step into those boots? Are you ready to learn what wilderness truly means? The choice is yours. But remember, once you look back, you can never look away.